Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, and this is in fact a predecessor video. However, it is not a predecessor gameplay video. Instead, we are actually going to be going over the new update. We're going to be going through the patch notes, we're going to be taking a look at things, the new hero, the new game mode, all of the new item balance changes, everything like that. So it's going to be a bit of an in-depth video. I'm not going to go into extreme detail on all of the numbers because honestly, it is an extreme amount of things that they've changed. And if I were to go into detail on everything, it would be probably a 3-hour long video. But we're going to do our best. We're going to skim through what we can, and we're going to hopefully, be helpful and a good summary for people who want to check out the update. Because like I said, there's a lot that is going to be changing. So with that being said, instead of blabbing, let's go ahead and jump right into the changes. First off, we've got some general overview here. We'll cover this stuff, as we oh, sorry, that was the wrong one actually. We'll cover that stuff as we go. But one of the biggest things, there's a lot of big things in this update. Biggest thing though is the new hero is here, Aurora. If you haven't seen anything about Aurora, she seems pretty cool. She seems to be kind of like a bruiser type mage, kind of like a Quang or maybe like a countess from what I can tell. She seems very close quarters, in your face. She seems to, from what I can tell, want to build a little more tanky and a little more bruisery, which is kind of why I'm likening her to Quang. But really quick, we'll go over her abilities if you haven't seen anything about them. Her passive is called Frozen Simulacrum. Simulacrum, that's a word for you. And when you damage an enemy, it creates an ice storm around you that refreshes on hit. So it just says on additional damage dealt. So I believe that's basics and abilities. I don't think the Frost Storm refreshes itself. I don't think the damage from this Frost Storm can refresh itself and just be infinite. I think you have to actually hit them with stuff in order to keep it refreshed. I don't know though. She's not out. We'll see. Another part of her passive is if you double jump, it moves you in the direction of your current movement and also leaves a replica. It leaves like a little statue that you can see right here. And it does say that it draws aggression from enemy towers. My question is, does it override the aggression that you get from hitting somebody, right? Like if you have minions under a tower, you can run around the tower all you want. But as soon as you hit an enemy hero under that tower, the tower switches aggro to you. If you put this statue under the tower, does tower immediately drop tower aggression? That's my question, and I do want to see that. Obviously, by the time this video comes out, things will be, a little more known, but this is being recorded on Monday so that I can get a little bit ahead of it. Next up, basic attack. She basic attacks. Crazy, I know. Her primary ability is she dashes, leaving an ice trail, which gives movement speed to allies, and actually we can just show the video. So she will leave kind of like a trail as she dashes, and it actually creates a wall. So you can wall people in or out of certain objectives. So like if you're playing around Fangtooth Pit, you can actually run your wall in front of the objective, making it much more difficult for enemies to get into or out of the pit, which I think is really, really cool. Next up, her secondary ability, which is a Hoarfrost. Again, I'll just play the video for you. It is a ring on the ground that deals damage, and enemies that get hit by the ring are rooted for 1.25 seconds. Now, the wording of this is really weird because it says enemies that touch the ring. So my question is, do the enemies have to be actually on the ring, or is it anywhere within the ring? You know what I mean? Like if you are face hugging Aurora, do you not get hit by this ability at all? Because if that's the case, that's a really hard ability to hit. You have to be exactly this distance in order to hit somebody with it. Finally, her alternate ability is just a cone of damage, does damage in front of her, The first instance of it, it does damage. The second instance, like a second or two later, it will detonate and it will deal additional damage and slow the target again. So there's a slow on it. So I'm guessing her combo would be like rooting people into this ability or slowing people into the root. That's probably your bread and butter, what you're looking for. Finally, her ultimate is a big slow in an AoE around her. She jumps into the air, she has an AoE around her. Big slow that progresses into a stun, which is what you just saw happen to the Grux there. He gets stunned right here, and then the stunned targets explode, dealing extra AoE damage to them and targets around them. It does say that enemies damaged will be slowed before exploding, dealing magical damage to them and nearby enemies, but it says that here and also with the target exploding, so I don't really know how the damage numbers work, but it does damage. So, there you go. Next up, it's just all like the new skins in the store. Not that big of a deal. If you want to take a look at this, you can find the patch notes. I'll link them in the description below. But you can read through the store stuff. I'm not going to go over those changes. But we do have another big change, a new game mode, which is actually Predecessor's first new game mode. So instead of the typical 5v5 on the 3-lane map, they are now introducing a 5v5 game mode they are calling Brawl, which is essentially an arena. It is a 5v5. It is not like a 3v3 or anything like that. It's a normal 5v5. It is on a kind of arena-style map that has a single lane, and the XP and the gold are, are much, take three, third time's a charm. The XP and the gold are much faster, meaning that you get things, you get your builds online much faster, the game progresses much quicker, so it's more of a fast-paced, casual, let's kill some people kind of game mode, which is really, really cool. If you know anything about Smite or probably most MOBAs and arenas, it follows a very, or arenas in MOBAs, excuse me. It follows a very similar pattern where each team has 400 points that they start with. Killing an enemy minion reduces the enemy's team's points by 1. If you kill an enemy hero, the enemy team's points reduced by 5. And if you shove a minion into the portal, right there, if you saw the portal at the end of the lane, each lane has a portal which spawns your minions. If you shove your minion wave into the enemy portal, it also reduces their point total by 1 for every minion that you push into the portal. I know that kind of sounds confusing, but it makes sense. It's a very simple scenario. However, in this game mode, Fangtooth is here, but Fangtooth is not an objective, it is actually a lane minion. So every 5 hero kills that your team gets, a friendly Fangtooth will spawn and it will actually walk up the lane with your minions. So these are kind of like the big siege minions in this Brawl game mode. And if they get pushed into the portal, the other team will lose 15 points. So it's a really, really big objective to push into the portal. They also do have some side, some side jungle in the map. It's not big. I don't know if there's you can kind of see in this overview shot. There is some side jungle with some buffs. The river buffs are on timers, very similar to the normal game mode. Actually, makes me question, what are they going to call the normal game mode now? Normal? Like, what's the name of that game mode? That's an interesting question. But river buffs are on timers, same as usual. They do introduce 2 new buffs. One of them is the orange buff, which gives you increased damage and jump height. So actually you can see these little like pillars and like these walls. It actually gives you increased jump height to the point where you can actually jump on top of those walls and get kind of a vantage point, which is really, really cool. And then they're also introducing a purple buff, which gives you some extra health and tenacity and makes your character model super, super big. I don't know why, well, not super, super big, but it makes it like, looks like 50% bigger. Like it's a considerable size change. I don't know why they make your character model bigger. It kind of looks a little funny, but also it kind of looks a little crazy when you see a giant lizard man Zarus running at you and he's like 2 times the height of you. So that is really cool. They also have some health packs around the map that you can grab to heal yourself. It's an AoE heal as well, so you can heal your teammates, anyone in a short radius around you. And Orb Prime is also in this game mode. Defeating it gives you the usual minion buff that you would get from the normal game mode. However, it also deducts 50 points from the enemy team, so it's a massive objective to secure, because not only does it help you snowball the rest of the game, but it immediately takes off 50 points, which is really big. And yeah, so that's the new Brawl Gamemode. Looks really, really cool. Looks like I said, you just gotta get in there and you run at people, and it's super cool. They did add some new audio changes as well. One of the big things, new announcer. That's cool. Haven't heard them yet. But there's a new announcer that they say will have clearer audio and a richer presence. So I'm hoping that this means that they improved their the latency on like kills. You know how when you get a kill, it like takes forever for things to show up. I'm really, really hoping that they improved that, because that is a huge pain in the butt. There have been so many times where I kill somebody, but it's like so backlogged by other things happening that I'm like, did they actually die, or like did they flash away without me noticing? Like there's so many things that happen. I'm like, I don't really know what happened. So I'm hoping they fix that. We'll see. They say they added ambient sounds as well. So enjoy walking down mid lanes at the sounds of distant explosions, or the sounds of minions clinking as they spawn and march to their inevitable demise. That is rough for those minions. But they say they added ambient sounds. That's cool, I guess. They also added new hero voice lines, so you don't hear the same two things every 2 seconds. So hopefully Gadget will say more than "have a hat" every 2 seconds now, because goddamn, every time Gadget is in mid, it makes me want to pull my hair out. Performance improvements, cool. They increased some FPS and everything. That's nice. Console localization, they're working on it, but they had to delay it. Matchmaking, I didn't cover this in my notes. I have like 6 pages of notes, by the way. I did not really read through this too much for my notes. It kind of seems like there was a problem in matchmaking. It was an edge case, they've called it, which means it's not a broad scale, but there was a problem in matchmaking where matches weren't being properly matched, I guess is the best word for it. And so because of that, they are kind of soft resetting the MMR and then allowing you to gain MMR faster to then make up for it. It just seems I shouldn't say band-aid solution, but it just seems like a, ranked is coming eventually, this is our solution for now kind of thing. So it's just, they're trying to improve the matchmaking. Hopefully it actually improves, because the matchmaking is awful. But now we're actually getting into the biggest change of the patch, the single biggest change, and the change that everything else revolves around. We have the 6-item patch. It is adding a 6th item slot to the game, meaning you can now build one more item than you ever could before. Obviously, this changes a ton, and the editors actually put a note here saying that game design gave us over 90 pages of changes. They aren't kidding. This is the changelog for the other, like the actual by the numbers changelog. It's disgustingly long, and we will be looking at it briefly later in the video. But for right now, we are going to ignore it because it causes me physical and emotional pain to look at a changelog this big. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top, and we'll go back to what we've been doing. So what's changed? 6-item slot. The biggest thing is that instead of reducing the price of items, they're actually just increasing gold and XP requirements across the map. And they state their reasoning a little later on, but basically their reasoning is that it should help them in future balance changes, because instead of crunching all of the numbers into really small, infinitesimally different numbers and like damage things, they're keeping the numbers very big so that small changes have a big impact, rather than going from like 0.0005 to 0.0006. Going from 5% to 6% is a big change, and they can really fine-tune things, which I really, really, really like that approach. So I'm hoping that that helps in the future for future balance changes, because it's a great approach to keep in mind. The biggest thing that I have in my notes is that they seem to have nerfed crit, maybe, but then they also kind of buffed crit later on with the item changes. It's fine. Crit's OP, everybody knows that, but they seem to have maybe nerfed crit, partially because T3 items, their crit chance is going from 25% to 20%. That makes perfect sense because now we have 6 items rather than 5. So the critical strike chance is being reduced so that it fills out that thing more. However, they are also reducing the base critical strike damage from 160 to 150. So critical strikes themselves are doing a little less than they were before, which is, again, hopeful that they nerfed crit, but then they added a bunch of items that are undoubtedly buffing crit, so, cool. But like I said, gold pacing increased by approximately 15%, and it takes less time to hit level 18, meaning matches should be a tiny bit quicker. You should hit max level a little bit quicker. I cannot tell you the amount of games that I have finished where one person out of the 10 people in the lobby is level 18. It is insane how long it takes to hit level 18 in this game. So they are increasing that a little bit. And yeah, there's a few other things as well that I wrote down. I am not entirely sure where it was. I think it's, oh yeah, it's right here. So health is now 25% higher. They did a lot of changes to heroes. They did a lot of individual changes to heroes, but they also did general rebalance changes as they have listed here. So health is 25% higher. The armor is lower so that it kind of offsets that increase in HP. However, a big thing that I did notice, a couple big things actually, that I did notice is that base health regeneration is now 50% higher, which I think is actually going to be really big for laning phase because it allows you to kind of stay out in the laning phase for longer than you would have been able to previously, right? Like if you get poked below 200 HP, you kind of have no choice but to either back up or back. Now your HP regen is 50% higher. Obviously your health pool is 25% higher. So, you're still going to be regenning not as fast, but the point standing being you will reach max HP faster because this is a 50% increase. Health is only 25% higher, so it's still a 25% increase in net difference from what it used to be. But either way, it's still a really big increase, which means I think laning phase might be a lot easier, maybe quicker. I'm not entirely sure as to the biggest differences for it, but hopefully that changes the laning phase. They also just straight up decreased attack speed growths. So this is another thing that I kind of noted that might be a nerf to crit. Again, might be, because you'll see in the future that they added items that don't. But attack speed growths are 20% slower, meaning that it's a direct nerf to carries in particular. Obviously, everybody has attack speed and whatever, but carries build around their attack speed. So now carries will have 20% attack speed, 20% less attack speed, meaning that they need to get more attack speed from items, and items that offer crit typically do not offer lots of attack speed until they added more items, which we will get to now. So the new items that they did add, they go over here, just the 20% change, from 25 to 20% change for the crits, all that stuff. Cool. New items, very fun. Judgment is a new crest that is taking the place of Phoenix. They actually fully removed the Phoenix crest, the one that revives you if you place a mark on the ground and revives you if you die. They've fully removed that, and it is now replaced by Judgment, which actually I'm looking in my notes, and it's telling me that, yeah, as I was writing it down, I'm like, Judgment doesn't have an E. That's a weird spelling mistake. Wonder if that's in the game. However, Judgment the Crest gives you physical power, HP, Omnivamp. Not a lot of power, not a lot of lifesteal. It seems pretty mediocre. However, the active is where you get a lot of your lifesteal, quote unquote lifesteal from. But you basically, it says unleash a whirlwind of energy around you, dealing damage. We'll just simplify that to damage to all nearby enemy units. Hitting enemy heroes heals you for a percentage of your total power plus 8% of missing health. My question, because they don't actually clarify this, is it 8% of your missing health or 8% of the enemy that you hit? Is it their missing health? This is one of the things about Predecessor that I'm not a huge fan of. Their wording is very confusing, and they never really clarify things. So that's something really big to kind of keep in mind. If it's 8% HP of your missing health, then obviously you kind of want to save this until you're a little bit lower. That way it's stronger. But if it's 8% HP of their missing health, then it kind of helps you win harder, right? If you're already winning, if you use this and they're low HP, you get healed for more, which makes me think that it's HP that you are missing, but it could be either. We don't know yet. And subsequent hero hits heal for 50% effectiveness so that you can't get a 5-man heal and heal your entire HP bar. You know, makes sense. Going into new items, these are T1 and T2 items, not important. If you want to read it, again, I'll have the patch notes linked below. You can read these, but they're really not important because they build into the T3 items, which is what we're actually going to be looking at. And this is what we're going to be spending most of the rest of the video on. So if you are here for this, welcome. First of all, we have carry items. They've added a couple new carry items. Equinox being the first new one. This is the one that I am worried about. I will not lie to you. It offers not a lot of physical power, 20 physical power. However, it gives 35% attack speed, which is a lot of attack speed, and also still gives you 20% critical strike chance. So if you remember earlier how I was like, oh, sweet, they're nerfing crit because they're lowering the amount of damage crit does. They're lowering the amount of attack speed that you get. Newsflash, they added a new item that gives you all of those stats anyway. Lovely. We like that. Nightshade, critical strikes deal 6% bonus true damage, so your crits just hit a little bit harder. And falling below 40% max health gives you a shield based on your level. So this makes it a really strong offensive item because your crits just hit harder, but also a really strong defensive item because it gives you a shield when you fall below 40% HP. I have a feeling you are going to be seeing Equinox on pretty much every hunter build. I think this item, just based off of its stats, is insane, and I am very worried about it. It's going to be cool, it's going to be fun, but I have a feeling it's going to be the new, Demolisher, where everybody just builds Demolisher. Speaking of Demolisher, just realized they never touched it in this patch. Big rip. Going on to the next one, Nuclear Rounds. Pretty interesting item, actually. It gives no inherent crit, gives 25% attack speed, a decent amount of power for an auto attack item. Oh, I'm sorry. It does actually give 20% critical strike chance. I must have misread that. Whoopsies. But your abilities... Oh, that's not the item I'm thinking of. The item I'm thinking of is the next one. This one does give you 20% critical strike chance, and your abilities deal more damage based on your critical strike chance, which is actually really interesting because it kind of means they're like sort of meshing ability-based hunters into the game. I have a feeling that this is going to be really good on characters like Revenant, maybe even something, I'm trying to think, like maybe like a Kira, right? Like your pistol shot just does a crap ton of damage now because you have a lot of crit strike chance. So characters like that are really going to be able to use their abilities, I think are really going to enjoy this item. I think this is a really cool item. Plasma Blade is the one that I was thinking about. Plasma Blade is another one that seems like it's going to be crazy on paper. I don't think it's going to be that good, but it seems really cool. It gives 35% attack speed. Once again, it has no inherent crit. However, if you look down a little bit further, Vibro Cutter. Basic attacks against heroes grant you 8% critical strike chance for 3 seconds. Cool. Stacking up to 5 times. This item alone can give you 40% critical strike chance. Now, the thing to keep in mind is they do not specify if these basic attacks fall off individually or if when you hit a basic attack, it refreshes that 3-second period. If this item falls off individually on stacks, it's fine, right? You need a lot of attack speed to make it worthwhile. Once you get up to that 5 stacks, they're going to be slowly falling off. You have to keep restacking them. However, if every single auto refreshes that 3-second cooldown and the stacks fall off altogether, this item is going to be insane because you hit 5 basic attacks, you get 40% crit, 35% attack speed, and suddenly you're just shredding anybody in front of you. So That's my biggest thing. If they fall off individually, seems fine. If they don't, I'm worried. Moving on to assassin items, though, they were adding a new item called Penumbra, which seems like a really cool item, actually. It gives a good amount of power. It gives 40 physical power, some decent health, some decent penetration. It gives 20 ability haste, which is a lot of ability haste for an item like this. And also, on a takedown, you reduce your non-ultimate cooldowns by 4 seconds. 4-second reduction on your abilities is crazy. Can you imagine this item on a character like Seraph, who already has this passive, right? Like when you take somebody down on Seraph, you pick up the orb, you proc your ultimate, and you get your cooldowns refunded by a certain amount. I don't know the number off the top of my head. But this, in addition to Penumbra, I feel like is going to be crazy on characters like Seraph. Like characters like Seraph, Fang Mao. Like, can you imagine? Fang Mao is just going to be dashing everywhere, right? Like he dashes onto you, glaive spin, executes you, turn around, do the same thing to the next person, do the same thing to the next. Like 4 seconds is a stupid amount of flat reduction on your cooldowns, especially late game when your cooldowns are typically like 5, 6, 7 seconds anyway. That's over 50% reduction. Early game, it's not the craziest because your cooldowns are closer to like 10, 12, 13 seconds. But by the late game, that's like a 60, 75% reduction on your cooldowns. It's wild to think about that on an item. Tainted Trident, this seems like a really cool item as well. It gives a good amount of physical power, a little bit of pen, and again, some decent ability haste. It applies anti-heal, so it's another anti-heal item. And also, the enemies that you hit with your anti-heal take bonus true damage from your abilities. My question is, does this bonus true damage apply as soon as you hit the enemy, or do you have to hit them once to apply the blighted strikes, and then the second hit will also apply the wound seeker because now they're blighted? You know what I mean? That's again something that we'll have to test. We will see. Moving on to fighter items, we have Earthshaker. Earthshaker gives 30% attack speed on a bruiser item, which is, it feels like a lot. I don't know if that's actually a lot, but for a bruiser item that gives a decent amount of physical power and 300 health, 30% attack speed feels like a ton. And this is mainly meant for melee characters because, as you can see right here, melee heroes stack the passive twice as fast. And basically, it just applies your ability damage increases by 1% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 15 times. This one definitely should be that the stacks refresh when you hit somebody, right? Because for it to stack 15 times, you would never get to the 15% damage increase. So this one, I would think, definitely increases, or the stacks, compound and they refresh when you hit somebody. Next item, Gaia Greaves. I'm really excited for this item because, first of all, look at all these stats. 350 health, 30 physical armor, 15 ability haste, 20% tenacity, and it's only 2,900 gold because it's meant to be kind of more like a support type item. It's listed under fighter, but it feels more like a support type item anyway, at least for the stats wise. But the passive is Tremor, move to generate 100 stacks of Tremor. Each stack grants 0.7 bonus move speed up to 70, so you get 70 extra movement speed while running around. And it enhances your next basic attack to do extra physical damage. So pretty decent in that essence. However, this is the thing I really want to see. Unburden. Increase your jump height by 75%. I went through this patch and I painstakingly found where it lists the changes to Galaxy Greaves, the Moon Shoes. They don't remove the Moon Shoes passive. Galaxy Greaves is still Galaxy Greaves. If you build this item with Galaxy Greaves, can you jump ridiculously high? Can you imagine doing this on phase, jumping 7,000 feet in the air and hovering there with her beam? You would be out of the fight for like 6 seconds. Like, are you kidding me? I really, really, really want to try this. It sounds so fun. Next item, Mist Meadow Buckler. It is a magic armor item with Omnivamp, which is pretty nice. You gain 15 extra magic armor at bonus stacks. Your stacks regenerate passively, 5 charges per second. So it doesn't stack with like movement speed or anything like that. And when you take magic damage, you consume the charges based on the amount of damage taken. Each charge consumed blocks 1 damage. So from my understanding, this means that you can block up to 100 damage if you have 100 stacks. The 100 stacks fall off, and then you have to wait to regen them a lot. Doesn't seem like the best item, especially since they regenerate 5 charges per second. It's a little slow, but I don't know, maybe we'll see. Again, the stats on it are decent, so. Moving on to mage items, we have Noxia. Noxia? I'm not entirely sure. It has a ton of power on it. It has 85 magical power, which is a ton for an item like this. And it still also gives you 20 ability haste, which is crazy. The passive is also pretty decent from what it looks like. Damaging an enemy hero with an ability marks them for 3 seconds. Dealing damage to a marked hero with a separate ability activates Dark Matter. Dark Matter, you deal 5% of the target's maximum HP as bonus magical damage. So basically, you hit them with an ability, it marks them. If you hit them with another ability within 3 seconds, it consumes that mark and deals extra damage based on their max HP. So pretty interesting. You know, you do extra damage. It seems to be more of an anti-tank item because, you know, tanks in this game apparently need to be nerfed, which I don't agree with, but sure, we'll go with that. Next item up is Soulbinder, which gives a ton of mana. It gives 400 mana right off the rip. It's not like a Zor core where you have to like stack it or anything. It just gives you 400 mana right off the rip. Gives you 75 magical power as well, and also 15 ability haste. And the passive is actually really interesting. You deal 8% additional true damage to enemy heroes that are at least 1,500 units away. So you have to be far away from the enemy you're hitting. So this isn't going to be an item for like a countess or something like that. But with each activation of Arcane Salvo, you permanently gain 1 magic power. You permanently gain 1 magic power, period. It's just, this dash is weird. And it's on a 12-second cooldown. My question is, does this stack infinitely? Because if you build this first item, and you're playing a character like Gadget, right? Every 12 seconds, you throw out a hat, and you get a stack on this thing. Every 12 seconds, you get a free stack that gives you an extra magical power. And you can just stack that infinitely for 40 minutes? That seems crazy. We'll have to see actually how good the item is, but that seems really cool. Moving on to support items, and I'm actually going to take a quick drink here because my mouth is getting really dry. Moving on to support items, we have Cresselia. It's got pretty decent stats, 45 magical power. It's a support item, so you don't really care too much about the magical power. Gives you nice mana regen, some good ability haste, blah, blah, blah. And it seems kind of like the support version of like an augmentation or an Elefrost, where when you cast an ability, it empowers your next basic attack to deal extra power, to deal extra damage on hit. And it also reduces your current non-ultimate cooldowns by 15%. So it seems kind of like a weird item. It might be decent on aggressive supports like a Richter or something like that, where you're kind of, you know, you cast your hook and then you auto somebody right after it. So then your hook is on a 15% lower cooldown, and your auto right after you casted it does extra damage. So like on that, it kind of seems interesting, but other than that, it seems kind of like a really weird niche item that I don't really see myself building on that much. I don't know. Maybe it's cool. We'll see. Next up, we have Dawnstar, which is an HP regen item. It gives 75% HP regen, which is pretty nice. And it gives a stacking debuff for anti-damage, which is really interesting. So if you look at the passive down here, your basic attacks reduce enemy heroes' damage dealt by 2% for 3 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. The question here again, obviously, like I was saying with the Equinox item for carries, do these stacks fall off individually, or do they refresh and fall off all at once? I don't know. We will see. But melee basic attacks apply 2 stacks, so you can stack that, you know, in 3 autos rather than 5. And on immobilizing enemy heroes, you actually gain 20% attack speed for 2.5 seconds. so it allows you to get those stacks off even quicker. This item seems really good for aggressive supports like a Richter or a Steel, right? Like you're Richter hooking somebody, you're getting that extra attack speed, you're lowering the amount of damage that they do. Steel, you dash in, you stun them, you auto attack them, lowers their damage dealt to you and your carry, anything like that. And honestly, even on a support like Decker, right? Like you hit your stun ball on Decker, you're probably going to auto them once or twice while they're stunned. You throw your cage up, now suddenly they're doing, 4% less damage kind of thing. They're doing 10% less damage. So seems pretty interesting. Obviously, Decker doesn't have the melee basic attacks, so might not be as good on her, but could be interesting. Moving on to the next one, we have Everbloom, which is also, it's an item that gives increased healing. So it 8% heal and shield power, so you heal for 8% more with this item. And heals give you and allies 5% damage mitigation and 15% tenacity for 2 seconds. That sounds cool. This seems utterly busted on a character like Narbash, because for what I can tell, this item has no internal cooldown, right? It doesn't say anywhere here, this passive applies every 10 seconds. This just seems like, oh, you have Narbash healing, you have a permanent 5% damage mitigation and a permanent 15% tenacity boost. Okay, cool. That's going to be like a must buy on a character like Narbash, if that's actually true. Finally, for the new support items, we have Lunaria, which gives a decent amount of magical power, some ability haste. Again, it's a healing and shield power item, so good on characters like Narbash, Muriel, stuff like that. This one probably particularly on Muriel instead of Narbash, and we'll go into that. But you gain charges of incandescence equal to the damage dealt to enemy heroes, and on healing or shielding an ally hero, consume all of the charges and heal the ally for an additional amount based on the charges consumed. This is basically the new Wellspring. They removed Wellspring from the game. This was Wellspring's passive for the most part. The mending part was. However, now it is a conditional passive where you need to actually deal damage in order to get those stacks for the mending passive, which is why I say it's probably going to be good on a character like Muriel, right? You hit your slow, you deal damage, you bubble your carry, you heal them based off the amount of damage that you did. Probably doesn't seem like it's going to be super good on characters like Narbash, because Narbash isn't really focusing on doing a ton of damage, which means you're not really going to be getting the mending passive all that much. But again, maybe you're just playing a really aggressive Narbash. I don't know. You do you, man. Finally, the last new item that they're adding is called Fist of Razul. It is a tank item. Gives you lots of HP, 450 HP, some decent physical armor, ability haste, blah, blah, blah. And when you take or receive damage, it stacks, you gain a stack of might. And when you reach 5 stacks, you empower your next attack to deal extra damage based off of your max HP, increased by 2% for heroes, and you heal for 50% of the damage dealt by this effect. This seems really cool, but at the same time, it seems really hard to time in a team fight, right? Like you're in the middle of a team fight, you're taking damage, you hit somebody with this ability, and you get the passive. Now, suddenly, you're moving on to the next guy, you don't have this passive anymore, and the passive might have helped you kill the next person rather than the first person, right? Say this passive procs on somebody who has 10 HP left. You kill them, the passive didn't help you kill them, your auto was going to kill them anyway, but you killed them with the passive. Now the next dude has 200 HP. You die because you don't have the passive anymore that would have allowed you to heal and do extra damage, and the other person lives because of that. So, seems like an interesting item, but because you can't really like activate it at any point, and it's just whenever you reach the stacks, your next basic attack does it, kind of seems like a little bit of an iffy item. Like I said, they did remove 9, they say 9 existing items here. I think they removed more, but they removed Phoenix. So Phoenix is now being replaced by Judgment, like we said before. They removed a few T2s with Abyssal Bracers and Hallowed Braid because they removed Requiem. And they removed Breach. Thank God. I'm so tired of seeing my carries build Breach. It was an awful item. I would say please don't ever build Breach, but you can't anymore, so that's good. They removed Viper, which is pretty interesting. I thought Viper was a decent enough item, especially on Drongo in particular. I guess only Drongo, I guess, so maybe that's why they removed it. They removed Bone Seeker and Tectonic Mallet. Bone Seeker, never really saw anybody build. Tectonic Mallet seems like a pretty interesting one because I saw that on a lot of builds. And they are removing Wellspring and Requiem. Like we said before, they removed Wellspring. They also removed Requiem, which is kind of a bummer because I actually really like that item, but it's not the biggest deal. So who cares? Moving on. And then they have a bunch of bug fixes. Again, I'm not going to go over these. If you have any particular bug fixes that you want to know if they fixed, you can go ahead and check out the bug fixes yourself. Again, the link will be in the description below. However, moving on to the big chunk of info, we are going into the item reworks, and let me see if I can scroll down to find them. Item overview, large item reworks and adjustments. They gave me a bookmark, thank you. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff above here that they changed. Again, a lot of it is very specific numbers for heroes that they changed and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into detail because this video would be 17 times longer than it already is. So instead, I'm just going to go over the item reworks very quickly, as quick as I can, so that it doesn't take up too much time. Big thing for the crests. There are a lot of changes with the crests. I'm not going to go over them all. I'm only going to go over the ones that stuck out to me as I was briefly reading through these. The first one that stuck out to me is Icecorn Talons. Icecorn Talons no longer has the 10 ability haste on it. So if you are building this on, honestly, this was a go-to for any character in the off lane. Icecorn Talons was just super, super good. You are no longer getting the ability haste. You are getting 4% Omnivamp, which is really good. Obviously, for people like Grux, right? You get the free Omnivamp. That's really, really good. But just keep in mind that you are losing that ability haste. Going on to the Mage Crests, they added ability haste across all of them. So Epoch, Soul Bearer, and Time Flux Band all get 8 ability haste. Soul Bearer actually goes from 10 to 8. It got nerfed, but they all get 8 ability haste, so keep that in mind. Next one up that I want to talk about is Typhoon. Typhoon loses its inherent attack speed, so you no longer have the extra 15% attack speed just outright from the item. However, to slightly help with that change, they increased the attack speed per stack from 3% to 4%. So instead of getting 12% attack speed once you hit 4 stacks, you now have 16. Quick math. I'm doing that right? 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16. Nailed it. Awesome. Yeah, so now you get 16%. So it's an increase in 4%, which is whatever. So that item seems much worse now, because even if you're increasing this by 4%, you are losing 15%, so you're overall losing 11% attack speed, which is pretty big for a starter item. Anything else? No, it looks like the rest of the crests all, Oh, actually, real quick, there was one more. Reclamation. Reclamation no longer has ability haste. I don't know why they removed that. Reclamation is one of the items for the support upgrade. I believe Reclamation is the one that cleanses CCs. Tranquility is the one that heals, I'm pretty sure. Silentium is the one that silences. I think Reclamation is the CC cleanse. I can't remember, but they removed the ability haste. Don't know why. Moving on to the items. Again, we're not going to look at the T2s because those don't really do anything. Moving on to the items, we have Ashbringer. Ashbringer, it got 20 ability haste. That's pretty much the biggest thing. They removed the attack speed, they gave it 20 ability haste, and the passive is better or simplified. I don't know what simplifieds mean, but it's simplified. Kingsbane has a full rework. Instead of a lifesteal item, now it is a stacking damage item. So you deal 15 additional on-hit physical damage. Subsequent hits on the same target increase Regicide's damage dealt to them by 5% of your total attack speed. So again, instead of being a high lifesteal item, they are now changing this to be a stacking damage item. The more attack speed that you have, the more autos you hit. The more autos you hit, the higher damage that this gets. it just looks so subsequent hits on the same target within 2.5 seconds increases regicide's damage dealt to them by 5% of your total attacking speed. So I guess it's technically not a stacking item. It just stacks once, which is kind of weird. So the first one, the first auto is normal, and then the subsequent hits is when you start getting that bonus power. But the bonus power itself doesn't seem to stack. Kind of weird, but sure. Lightning Hawk is getting a kind of rework, kind of quality of life change. Instead of every 4 autos, the passive now stacks when you are moving or landing autos. It does not say when it says landing basic attacks generate stacks of momentum. It doesn't say how many stacks of momentum landing a basic attack generates. So I don't know if this is a straight up buff or a nerf. Not entirely sure. It's probably, again, it's probably just more of a quality of life change rather than a buff or a nerf. But we'll have to see. Resolution got a pretty big update. I'm going to be honest, hadn't even heard of Resolution before I looked at these patch notes. Didn't know what the item did. Gonna be honest, probably still isn't great, but it looks better now. So instead of the potent font passive on Mind Razor, they moved the passive from Mind Razor and put it onto Resolution. Don't know why, but they did. Your basic attacks deal bonus damage based off of your max mana. And again, you have the Mind Razor passive now on Resolution. So it's kind of like a damage item that damages more based on your max mana. Don't entirely see how that fits into Hunter builds, but you do you, game. Moving on, we have Sky Splitter. Sky Splitter as well. Pretty much the same thing. Or sorry, no, I'm reading this incorrectly. I'm kind of looking ahead of my notes. Sky Splitter, they changed it similar to Lightning Hawk, where it's no longer every 4th auto applies the passive. Now it is every auto. The wording of this seems really, 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 really good. I might be reading it wrong because this seems absolutely crazy. But your basic attacks deal 5% of the target's current health as bonus physical damage on hit. Always deal at least 15 damage. So every single auto, you are getting 5% of the target's current HP as more bonus damage on top of those autos. That seems really good, especially for objectives. So again, don't know if I'm misreading that, but it seems like a really strong item. Not that it matters because Sky Splitter was also already really good. Stormbreaker, this is the item that I was looking at before. They did the same exact thing that they did to Lightning Hawk. Instead of every 4th auto, the stacks are generated by moving or landing basic attacks. Cool. Moving on. Terminus. Terminus now has a second passive, granting you extra lifesteal when the wielder gets low. So for every 10% of your missing health, you gain 1% extra lifesteal. So it kind of helps you when you're getting low. Moving on. Envy now has a silence on the auto that you crit. So, upon dashing, leaping, or exiting camo, empower your next basic attack within 3 seconds to critically strike. Upon critically striking with sacrificial strikes, silence the target for 1.25 seconds. 1.25 seconds is a considerable length of time for a silence. Especially when a lot of abilities in this game, can just be immediately CC'd out if you're not building something like True Silver Bracelet. This seems really, really good, right? Oh no, a Gideon's ulting. What if I just, Chimera jump and auto him? Or I come out of Kalari stealth and auto him. Suddenly his entire ult is negated. He can't do anything else. So that seems like a really big buff. Kind of interesting for that. Infernum now deals extra damage against targets the more bonus armor they have. So again, another anti-tank item, rip tanks in this update. We'll see how this works. But Mind Razor, very simple. They just removed the stacking mana passive because they gave it to Resolution. Nothing else to be said. Nightfall, takedowns now give you a shield. So takedowns grant a 200 to 400 HP shield based on your level for 3.5 seconds. My thing, this seems okay, whatever. I think this might be really, really cool if you pair it with the new item Penumbra. If you remember the new item Penumbra, when you get a takedown, it reduces all of your non-ultimate cooldowns by 4 seconds. If you get a Penumbra proc into a Nightfall proc, you get a huge shield and you get all of your cooldowns refunded. It really helps you snowball a fight if you're getting kills. So that could be kind of cool, actually. Omen now refunds 20% of your cooldowns instead of the 1.5 seconds. This feels like a nerf because, again, by late game, flat cooldown reduction is better because your cooldowns are like 4, 5, 6 seconds long. And 20% of 4 seconds, I'm not going to do that math, so I'll do 20% of 5 seconds, make it easier for myself, is 1 second. Whereas, as opposed to the 1.5 second reduction from before. So this feels like a nerf. It could be an early game buff because 20% of 12 seconds is longer. Again, not going to do that math because my brain's not working right now. But early game percent cooldown is better. Late game flat cooldown is better. So this kind of like shifts Omen into being more of an early game item, which is cool, I guess. Augmentation no longer gives you the extra movement speed on your ult, but instead the auto, well, not instead, it no longer gives you the extra movement speed, period. But the auto that now, I'm really struggling wording this. Upon using the ability, empower your next basic attack within 4 seconds to deal bonus true damage on hit. Cool, that was always the passive. It now scales off of your base physical power instead of your attack power. Not entirely sure what that means. We'll see though. Draconum no longer gives you bonus power on the Surge passive. So before, when you were dealing damage to monsters, you would gain bonus power. Now you don't. And the takedown HP recovery has been buffed so that it also recovers 4% of your missing HP. So it makes you a little more able to kind of stay in fights with the Draconum buff. Mutilator no longer steals max HP from enemies. Plain and simple. That passive has been removed. Astral Catalyst has a new passive where you now deal 30% bonus damage to shielded targets. I still don't think this item is going to be good, but could be decent now. Azure Core, say that 10 times fast. Azure Core now has a shield at low HP, so upon falling below 40% max HP, you gain a 25% of your max mana shield. That's a pretty big shield, right? If you have, let's just say you have 1,000 mana. Again, I'm using this example to make it easy for myself. You have 1,000 mana. You fall below 400 of 40% max HP. Suddenly, you get a 250 HP shield. That's pretty good for a mid-mage, right? If you're like a gadget or a countess and you're building a Azure Core or something like that, or like an Argus and you're building a Azure Core, suddenly you just have, that much more survivability when you're being dove in the late game. Seems pretty nice. Caustica no longer has the extra mana regen, but instead you increase damage against targets with high magic armor. So while an enemy hero are above 50% max HP, your magical ability damage dealt to them is increased from 0.35. I don't know why it says from 0.35 for each point of bonus magical armor they possess. So another anti-tank item. Yay, tanks. Lifebinder no longer has the extra mana regen, and instead it I was looking at my Caustica notes. Whoopsies, Lifebinder. The power and the lifesteal now scale with missing HP. So the more missing HP you have, the more power and lifesteal you get from it. If you're not missing a lot, you don't get stupid amounts of lifesteal. However, it still is 15% lifesteal. I believe Lifebinder used to be 18%, which means it's only a 3% reduction in lifesteal, which means by the time you get below 70% HP, right, you're missing 30% HP, you're already back at 18%. And the lower your HP gets, the more you get. So this actually, looking at it now for the second time, this just seems like a straight up buff to Lifebinder, which is really cool because I like that item. Magnify now has a full rework. It gives 8% Omnivamp, some ability haste, HP, 60 magic power, which is a considerable amount of magic power. And moving or casting abilities generates stacks of focus. At 100 stacks, you empower your next basic attack on hit to deal extra magical power as bonus magical damage, and you shred the target's magical armor by 15% for 4 seconds. This item seems like it's going to be really, really good on bruiser mages like Quang or maybe even Aurora when she comes into the game. I think characters like that are magic damage characters but really want to be up in your face, even like a Richter jungle, right? Like you're building more damage on Richter jungle than you would Richter support. You get a lot of benefit out of this. So that seems like a really interesting ability. I think it's going to be pretty cool new item. Not a new item, but a reworked item. Oblivion Crown they just straight up nerfed it. They removed the extra damage passive. Before, it was like you deal extra damage against targets that were below 40% HP, whatever it is. They just straight up nerfed this item, which is weird because they really didn't straight up nerf anything else. I don't know why they just took their anger out on Oblivion Crown, but they did. Orb of Growth no longer gives ability haste. I take it back. They nerfed Orb of Growth. No, they didn't, because they also buffed Orb of Enlightenment. They buffed the other stats that Orb of Enlightenment gives you. So the item no longer gives you a crap ton of ability haste. That's kind of sad because I like that ability. I like that item. Prophecy no longer gives bonus attack speed from haste. I'm so sad about this. This was such a cool item. It was such a cool item concept where you get bonus attack speed based off of your ability haste, so you can make these really interesting builds. They just took that out of the game, and I'm so sad because now you just can't really do attack speed like Decker. You can't do attack speed Shinbi. Like, these really cool niche builds just aren't possible anymore, and I'm so sad about that. It does still give attack speed on the passive, so it's still decent in that sense, but it no longer converts the extra ability haste to attack speed, and I'm sad. Spirit of Amir, they removed the inherent lifesteal from the past, they removed the inherent lifesteal, but it still has the 8% magical lifesteal while you're in the jungle, so you still get that benefit. You no longer get the mana regen from killing jungle monsters, but you do 8% more damage to jungle monsters, so it's kind of a give or take. Your mana regen as a jungler won't be as good, but you will clear camps faster, so you might not have to use as many abilities on said camps. So kind of cancels out. Also really helps against objectives. That's just 8% more damage against an objective. Yay, objectives. Moving on, Wraith Leggings, they removed the speed from the passive, the bonus speed that you would get from hitting an enemy hero. They removed that from the passive, and instead they just put 5% movement speed onto the inherent stats of the item. I'm going to be honest, I looked into the item description, I did some research, and old Wraith Leggings say that when you hit an enemy hero, you gain 100 movement speed. I don't know what that means. I don't know what the values are. I don't know if 100 movement speed is better or worse than 5%. Obviously, percent can change. If you're building more movement speed, percent has a higher influence. I just don't know, I don't know what 100 movement speed comes out to be, kind of thing. Support item changes. We have Dynamo. Dynamo basically just makes you do more damage now. Pretty cool. Vanguardian, they removed the bonus armor from the passive, but instead they just kind of added it to the inherent stats. I think doesn't really seem to have done anything for the item, but okay. Hexbound Bracers, this is an interesting one. You no longer have the bonus ability haste when you are above a certain mana threshold. Instead, you take less damage from hero basic attacks, which is pretty interesting. It's another anti-attack item, rather than just having like Frost Guard and stuff like that. What's next? True Silver Bracelet. They added base mana regen. That's pretty much it. They removed some ability haste and added base mana regen. Wind Caller. They added inherent movement speed. So now building the item gives you 3% movement speed. They removed the ability haste and health, blah, blah, blah. But they increased the movement speed when healing or shielding an ally hero. So now, if you heal or shield an ally hero, you have a total of 15% movement speed from this item. And the person that you heal or shield has 12% movement speed. That seems pretty good. That seems pretty zoomy. Again, for characters like Muriel and Narbash, who are constantly healing and shielding the team, that seems really strong. Might want to mess with that item. Moving on to tank items, we have Elefrost. They added the they added base mana regen to the item. They removed the mana restore passive. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but they added base mana regen, and they added 125 base mana regen, which is a ton. Fire Blossom now has a stacking scaling damage component to its damage. So rather than doing bonus damage to immobilized enemies, Now, the longer you stand around an enemy, the progressively more damage they will take from Fire Blossom. So that seems pretty nice. Again, don't know if it's a straight up buff or just a change. Seems like a change, might be a buff though. Frost Guard, they added HP regen and magic armor. So you actually get magic armor from this item now. And you get 75% base HP regen. So it makes it feel better to build. Raiment of Renewal is getting a full rework. It gives you a ton of HP, 550 HP off of a single item. It gives you 50% base HP regen, and it gives you 10 ability haste, whatever. But Regenerator, while out of combat, regenerate 2.5 of your missing HP per second. That is insane. This passive is crazy. Like compared, like also with the 50% base HP regen, if you just get out of combat, like if you're laning phase, right? Let's say you're playing Rampage off lane and you take a lot of damage. You dip into the jungle, you get your healing from your Rampage passive, and then now you're out of combat and you regenerate 2.5 of your missing HP per second. You stand in the jungle for 5 seconds. What is that? 10. I don't know why I keep doing math in this video. I need to stop doing this. So 5 seconds, that's 10, 2 points. So that's 12.5% of your HP that you just recovered in 5 seconds. Not only including the passive HP regen, the HP regen from Rampage's passive itself, and the 50% base HP regen on this item. Like, hello? This item seems insane. Also, for each level, gain a 5% additional base health regen. So by the time you're level 18, that's an amount of math that I won't be doing. Stonewall, moving on. They just gutted this item, it feels. Like, straight up, it feels like Oblivion Crown, where they were like, man, this item's getting built a lot, nerfed into the ground. They completely removed the Shockwave stun passive. So before, when you got below a certain health threshold, I think it was 40%, you would send out a Shockwave, and it would stun people around you. Completely removed that. They removed the base health regen as well. And also, again, I was doing some research. This passive right here, totally gutted. From what I can tell before, it was you take 10 plus 12% less physical damage. Now it's take 5 plus 6% less physical damage. They like ruined this passive. This item is awful now. I don't know why they hated Stonewall, but they did, and Stonewall will never be built again. But after that, they just go over smaller item changes. I'm not going to go through that again. If you want to read them, I'll link the patch notes below. But that is all of the notes and changes. This video is an hour long. My God, I have had my notes up and didn't see. Wow. Okay. All right. Lots of patches, lots of changes. I will do my best to annotate the video so that it gives chapter breakdowns of where I'm talking about things. I will try my best to do that. So hopefully you can kind of move around during the video and skip to parts that you actually want to see. But this has been the version 0.18 patch for Predecessor. The patch goes live tomorrow, May 21st. And it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm very excited. So this video will be coming out tomorrow, 2 p.m. if you're seeing it live. Hi, how's it going? I will be playing some games and recording some stuff for Wednesday. I'm going to be doing an Aurora video for tomorrow, Wednesday, the 22nd. So if you're interested in catching that, feel free to subscribe to the channel so that you actually can see when the videos go live. But with that being said, that's all for this video. I got to go down an entire gallon of water because my mouth is crazy dry right now. So yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day or your night, and I will see you again in the next video. See you, everybody. Peace. Tell me what you're thinking, is it weird? Is it something sort of honest, sweet? And